A major indie studio just admitted they were too romantic about stable jobs, and it could reshape how games get made. Here's what caught everyone off guard. Monument Valley's CEO came out and said the studio has been operating under a romantic ideal, that they should maintain permanent employees and offer genuine long-term job security. But they've now decided that approach isn't realistic anymore. This isn't some anonymous industry figure. It's the head of one of indie gaming's most respected studios publicly admitting they need to change course. The confession signals a fundamental shift in how Monument Valley plans to build games going forward. It's a rare moment of transparency about the gap between what sounds good in principle and what actually works in practice. So, here's what Monument Valley is actually doing about it. The studio is moving away from that traditional model where you hire a core team and keep them on payroll between projects. Instead, they're shifting to a contractor-based, project-by-project approach. You assemble the specific talent you need for a game, work through development, and then that team disperses when the project wraps. CEO frames this as the only realistic way to sustain operations without hemorrhaging money during the inevitable gaps between major releases. This isn't just about cutting costs either. The logic goes like this. A permanent staff sitting around waiting for the next project to greenlight is expensive overhead that indie studios, even successful ones like Monument Valley, can't justify anymore. By treating each game as its own hiring cycle, studio only pays for the exact talent it needs, exactly when it needs it. Contractors get flexibility and variety in their work. Monument Valley gets financial breathing room. On paper, it sounds efficient. But here's the catch. Developers lose the stability that permanent positions provide. No consistent paycheck between projects, no benefits continuity, no sense of belonging to something long-term. It's a pragmatic solution to a real problem, but it fundamentally changes what it means to work in game development. But this isn't just Monument Valley's problem, it's a symptom of something much bigger happening across indie game development. The reality is brutal. Making a successful game takes 2, 3, sometimes 5 years. In that time, a studio has to pay salaries, rent, benefits. Then the game launches, and if it doesn't hit massive numbers, there's no revenue to justify keeping those same people on payroll while the next project gets greenlit. That gap between releases is where studios hemorrhage money. Meanwhile, crunch culture has made permanent positions feel less secure anyway. Developers are expected to work overtime during production, then face layoffs the moment a game ships. It's created this weird situation where permanent employment doesn't actually mean security. It just means you're tied to one studio through the hardest months of your career. The project-based model Monument Valley is adopting actually acknowledges what's already happening on the ground. Contractors get hired for what they're needed for, then move on. It's honest about the instability, even if it sounds colder. The question is whether that honesty makes things better or worse for the thousands of developers who chose game dev partly because they wanted stable careers, not gig work. Here's where this gets serious. Monument Valley isn't some unknown studio. They made one of the most acclaimed indie games of the last decade. When a studio with that much cultural weight shifts their entire employment philosophy, other studios take notice. If this model spreads across the indie sector, you're looking at a fundamental reshaping of game dev culture. Thousands of developers who entered the industry hoping for stable careers could find themselves constantly hunting for the next contract, the next project. We've already seen this play out in VFX and animation. Once a few major studios went contractor-heavy, it became the industry standard almost overnight. The concern isn't just about paychecks. It's about sustainability. Contractors don't build institutional knowledge the same way. Teams can't experiment as freely when everyone's watching the budget clock. And developers lose leverage, no benefits, no job security, no voice in long-term creative decisions. The irony is stark. A studio built on artistic vision might inadvertently create conditions that make bold, experimental games harder to produce. If Monument Valley's gamble succeeds financially, expect this to become the new normal across indie development within 2 years.